It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. This is an important event. The Romas, modeled after historical Ukrainian Romani communities. There's a lot to unpack, so I want to start by recapping the whole thing. You arrive during a sick jam session, get drunk with a local dancer, Lala, and her fiance, Florin, gets mad. The next day the whole clan moves up a mountain to revive God, since that's what they're destined to do. Kiefer and Lala stay behind for unimportant reasons. You do a bit of a dungeon, find out that you have the ability to read ancient texts. Kiefer and Lala arrive, and then the ritual can begin. Or it could, but the time isn't ripe. Florin tries to force it anyways, but nothing happens. It turns out Florin has a mark on his chest, the same that you and Lala have, and two people with the mark can't marry. The reasons why aren't given. So he tried to fulfill his destiny by reviving the Almighty so that he and Lala could afterwards get married, but that failed. Kiefer then stays behind as the new guardian and eventually marries Lala. The love story between Kiefer and Lala isn't much of a love story. The game only shows us how it starts, and we need to fill out the rest for ourselves. Florin tried to free himself by obsessively forcing his current destiny to fulfill, so he can finally be done with it and start anew. Kiefer and Lala, however, solved the same problem in a different way. They simply wish to abandon their duty, and they do. This is what they have in common, and probably why they end up getting married. They disregard the opinions of their own communities and escape them by forming their own through marriage. For Kiefer, this is obvious. He escapes from the duties as a prince and now stays with the Romas. But what about Lala? Isn't she still part of the Romas? Isn't she still trying to revive the Almighty? I think this comes down to Kiefer being alongside her and supporting her in her struggles against the fate laid out before her. He is outspoken about her duty only being secondary to her as a person. Through him being introduced, the Romas and their opinions change. So the Romas that Lala and Kiefer are now staying with are different people from the ones we met. And that's the last we see of Kiefer. Besides a grave and later on their descendants. This shows us that he was in fact able to determine his own fate, who he would become. But I've been throwing the terms destiny and fate around a lot. Even Kiefer speaks of destiny, but isn't he fighting destiny? He's jealous of you being born to do something, yet he's fighting exactly against the role he was born into. And isn't he just jumping from one path laid out for him onto another? Would the mark on your hand not still be seen as destiny, forcing you into something whether you want it or not, just like with Florin? Importantly, unlike Kiefer, you're not forced into the role of the savior of the world. The protagonist isn't a character with motivations. Your motivations are the player character's motivations, and if you're playing a Dragon Quest game, that means you know what you signed up for. You could pick another game, and Florin is only as bound to his destiny as was Kiefer. For Kiefer, the difference is between what he was born into and what he chose for himself. He had something only he could do, but decided to do something everyone can do simply because he wanted to do it. When I or the game use the words destiny or fate, it means the path you would go down if you didn't have the hour-long adventure at the beginning of the game, where you go against the expectations and rules enforced on you since birth. The intro where you question everything around you. And as I put it in the video on it, break free from this infantilization in order to grow up. Destiny is the path you would arrive on if you didn't choose for yourself. Dragon Quest VII's intro sequence was all about carving your own path. Each of the three characters are fighting against their birthright. You won't become a fisherman, you bought Dragon Quest after all. Maribel won't listen to her father, and Kiefer doesn't want to be a prince anymore. Whether everything in the world is predetermined doesn't matter for this and is an entirely different philosophical debate. So another question that comes up is, didn't Kiefer already find his place in the world? Doesn't he want to adventure alongside his friends forever? Adventure is not a permanent place. He doesn't decide against you, yet he still decides against his home. Adventuring was only a way to get away from his home for a little while. But what comes after he's done adventuring? Getting out of the house, away from his duties, was more important than what he was specifically doing, and now he found a permanent place. Dragon Quest 7 in not only dimension stories, but even for example with Wrath, who is born as a silver wolf, meant to protect Laka, can be seen as a harsh contrast to the tropes of self-fulfilling prophecies and unavoidable destiny that are usually seen in fairy tales, which this game is so similar in vibe to otherwise. It's a world in which fate is in your own hands and something made, not born into. Very soon the Aldwaits Abbey will even allow you to now determine what you want to be for yourself. But that's only the first layer of this event. Besides wanting to escape his destiny, why did Kiefer choose this specific tribe? It's him finding his home among the homeless. The tribe defines itself by not being shackled down to one geographic location. And this is a good time to discuss the tribe itself. And first of all, I would like to explain why I called them inspired by traditional Ukrainian Romani communities. They use a turban, which is a rare Ukrainian instrument. This of course makes it special, something not mundane and therefore possibly mystical. It makes sense to pick an unknown instrument. Then of course the Romas are nomadic. Something else I want to mention is that Romani dances like flamenco are often said to reflect their people's traditions and freedom. This is something Dragon Quest has already covered back in Dragon Quest 4, where at least in the English localization the song for Mina and Maya is called Gypsy Dance. Of course the name is problematic, but the message, the culture it connects to is the same. So both song and dance are based on a very specific culture. But why? Is this really arbitrary? There will be a second visit of the Romas, then we'll also learn more about them being successors to a holy order that helped the Almighty fight against Orgodemir, but for now I don't have the full answer. I can only assume that it's a mix of obscurity, the Romani culture being a breeding ground for mysticism, freedom as a value, Christianity being so widespread in the Ukraine. According to Wikipedia, 82% of the population are in some way, shape or form Christian, and while that does not 100% fit with Romani traditionally not having a unified religion, I believe that also sort of functions because the Romas don't believe the same thing as everyone else. They don't know the full truth about the Almighty, but they know more than anyone. They're guided by ancient texts, though even here they are shown to be faulty and incomplete. Their belief is still not the right one. Nobody has the right belief yet. The message in that again is to not blindly follow directions given to you, whether it's Kiefer's father or an ancient text of unknown origin responsible for said directions. But finding a moral doesn't mean we're done with this visit yet. There's more to discuss. It was previously implied that the Almighty isn't around anymore, but reviving him is the first concrete evidence that this world is not only forsaken, but God is dead in a literal sense. Or at least he was sealed away, so the obvious follow-up question is, did we kill him? I can't fully answer this as of yet. I'm saving it for the Gnosticism video. But the short version is that Orgodemir was only able to seal him away because humans got locked up in their own bubbles. They didn't communicate and they didn't even know what was going on in the world. It was their knowledge that killed God. I don't need to repeat the message. Now finally I want to also talk about the personal level of this event. Something hard to rationalize is the feeling that players are left with. The event has no boss fight, no visible force of evil, but Kiefer leaves you permanently. He's not snatched away from you. He decides that he would rather go separate ways now. And I explained the reasons before, but no amount of explaining can change how players perceive this. Kiefer was strong and the game doesn't scale down the monsters for the subsequent areas. They are stronger than before and you have less people, you are weaker than before. This will leave players frustrated and sad, even if they can acknowledge that this is right for Kiefer in a narrative sense, and I quite like this. There aren't many instances where a party member leaves you that feels so mature, despite again the party members looking like children. Kiefer was a guiding force, he was competent, he was arrogant and was sometimes overeager. He was a member of your group, he was your best friend and you will never see him again. And as it was in the other events, that's still alright. It was just circumstances. It didn't require a Sephiroth to jump down and impale him from behind. You'll never meet him again, the game is harder without him, but you're gonna get through this and in the end it will turn out that this was for the best. And of course I'm not saying that tearjerkers and character deaths are unimportant, they most definitely have their place, but I think this is also a highly relatable and moving moment. It's okay that he chose a different path from you, and this goes back to the message about being able to choose your fate for yourself. not blindly following. Because even if your friends are actively inconvenienced by your decision, you need to choose your own path. Kiefer chose not what's best for the party, but what's best for him. The bigger picture wasn't something he cared about, and it isn't something Drank with 7 thinks you should care about. I'm relatively far into writing the script on Gnosticism, probably too far, but for now this is what I see as the core message of this game. You aren't born with a destiny laid out before you, at least not one known by other people. You uncover your own fate. You should live for yourself first and shouldn't become a martyr. This idea is strongly enforced by the next event in which you unlock the in-game ability to choose your own path.